Firstly, I'll give you a little bit of a very quick background on me. Background, then we'll start a longer background on this thing called bookbinding and its many facets, and certainly spend a bit more time on artist books, because I'm assuming most of you are here because you are artists or your background is art, and that's where you maybe have an interest. So very briefly, I began my working life as an art teacher, so there's the link. I painted quite seriously for many years, and then and exhibited and all of that, and then sort of stopped for whatever reasons. I was working, I then had a job with a paint material company, which was more or less a marketing and researching and all that, so asked me to come over and see and spend some time on their mill to understand the paper, and they were having an international exhibition. So I'd never been to Japan. It blew my mind, and I saw their paper, which I didn't even know existed. So that changed my life, as it does, you see. I came back and said, right, I've got to do something with all these wonderful papers. So I started a retail shop of specialty papers, and I've been doing that for the last 15, 16 years. In the course of being in Japan, I also saw the most wonderful handmade little books, cards, you know, the origami and everything, and I'd never been exposed to that. And what I loved was that everybody did it. It wasn't a prerogative of the artists, the gifted few. Everybody did it. It was just an ordinary thing. They didn't buy their New Year's greeting card, they made them. And I just thought, that just rang bells, because I said, I really think everybody is creative and should be doing creative things and not just feel it's this some other people. They had their masters, of course, and they venerated their masters in this area. So it wasn't as though there weren't some that arrived at a point of excellence, which was really very exciting to see. But then everybody still did it. So I came back a bit changed and a bit determined to do that. I wanted to do bookbinding, and I wanted to deal with beautiful papers. And in the course of learning bookbinding, I didn't know where to go to learn bookbinding. I went here, I went there, I found anything I found that anybody who taught anything about bookbinding, off I went. But I didn't want to do Japanese bookbinding per se, because I thought, I'm not Japanese, I can't relate to that culture. I was inspired by them. I want to do, I don't know, I just want to understand bookbinding. So around the traps I came across what was really a almost trade-related training of bookbinding. Some people said, oh, you'll find it a bit dry. It's just really the technique of bookbinding. And I said, well, the creative side's not a problem to me. I sort of have that from my background. I do want to learn the basic skills of bookbinding. So I was very fortunate in that I went and learned what is really the traditional Western bookbinding skills. And it opened my eyes to that tradition of bookbinding, which I didn't know anything about. But of course, I also had a love of that bookbinding could be a very creative thing as well. So I've been doing that for the last, 10 whatever years. And because I had a teaching background, it was very easy to sort of marry the two and then teach aspects of bookbinding. So my bookbinding teaching, which happens now, both can involve totally traditional bookbinding, which can lead to restoration and all that sort of work, to artist books. That's not me, is it? No. Somebody's phone? No. Okay. So artist books are a totally different thing, which I'll come to in a little time. I just noticed I didn't consciously, but I put up a box there that says COFA on it. I've been teaching artist books at COFA for, 5, 6 years, which is a segment, and they are talented art students, and of course they have to create a full art piece, which is very exciting what they do. All right, so that's enough about me. A little bit about bookbinding. Okay, I'm going to read you a lovely... What is this about books? Like, I have people come into the classes, young people, when I thought we're all going to just read books on these electronic things. And I said, what are you doing in here? You're supposed to not be interested. Oh, I just love books. I said, what do you mean by I love books? Oh, I don't know, I just love them. I thought I'd like to make them. I said, that's fabulous. One of the COFA students, I said, you seem to be enjoying this. And she said, oh, this is awesome. I said, what is it about this? And she said, it is so exciting to get your hands and make something. She said, we all sit behind these plastic screens often. She said it's just so exciting to make something, to be able to pour myself into it. And she said, do things, just leave it on the kitchen table. And I said, fantastic. In other words, it's getting back to touching. So they were all nice things that came back to me. So the book is alive and well. But here is a beautiful quote. And this is from an Egyptian papyrus about 1300 years BC. Man decays, his corpse is dust, all his kin has perished, but a book makes him remembered through the mouths of the readers. And I thought, all right, have a little think about the history of books. It is a container of information. We've gone through periods where the book is seen as so powerful it had to be burnt because it contained something about a religion or a culture or a belief that somebody felt had to be annihilated, so the books were burnt. Somebody wrote, the pen is mightier than the sword. What is it? Something is in these books. We communicate, yes, like that said, through the ages, through a book. So the book is something that creates an emotional response from us, and that seems to be alive and well. I came home in the bus from somewhere, and school was breaking up, and there were all these kids waiting to get on the bus, and here was this about 14-year-old with the one sock down and one sock up and a shirt like this, and he's leaning on the lamppost, Mr. Cool, with a screwed-up novel in his hand. And I thought, hey, I'm not supposed to see that. It's not supposed to be happening. And here it was all screwed up, and he was totally lost in his own little bubble of space. I thought, yes, that's what it does. You pick up the book to read, and down comes this little glass bubble, and you and that author are having a conversation and a relationship. And it just cuts you off from everything else. So there's a sort of a little magic thing happening. So yes, books are to persuade, books are to delight, books are to contain information, books of illustrated plants were the first, and animals were the first that went back to England to show them what this strange country was out here. So books are maps, and contained in books are maps and illustrations. So they have a long history. Maybe it's under some threat now, maybe not. It'll be our children's children who will see. Illustrations in books have always been paramount because the book had to be bound. And that brought in the use of materials, and the containment was put in, and that was an excuse for some of the people who did that to think, oh, it'd be nice to decorate it a little bit. So that started to have its own journey. And you probably know we started off by chopping things into lumps of stone. It wasn't very portable. Next thing, there were sort of scrolls made, which was very good, but a little bit awkward when you wanted to reread a passage. Very hard to store, easy to crush, very hard to transport. So some clever person about 300-400 years AD made the first codex. The codex is the book form as we know it. And it's called Coptic books, and if you know your history, the early Copts, they made the first codex books, which looks remarkably like what we can do today in a book in what we call sections that are all stitched together. Much more portable, much easier to read and go back and reread, and it was made usually out of skin. There's a little story where Egypt, the papyrus leaves were used, was the one writing surface, but then this Charlemagne person wanted to have a fantastic library, and Egypt didn't want him to have a library that would rival their library, so said, right, we're not going to sell you papyrus anymore. That was okay, he was already experimenting with skins. And then we had the vellum and the parchment skins being used. And they are skins that, with a little moisture, really want to warp all over the place, so they had very thick, heavy wooden covers, and some even had clasps, and that was to just keep those pages from warping too much. And they became a look which we all sort of quite like to look at these early books. So that's a contemporary Coptic binding using exactly the same stitching technique that they used, but just other materials in our paper. So books then progressed, and I suppose the next biggest, or two very big things that happened was somebody invented this thing called a printing machine.
Suddenly books became more available. Bookbinders had, when there were like one bookbinder in a city, I think suddenly there were like 40 bookbinders in London, because the way the books were being produced, they had to be bound and they were all hand bound. So there was wonderful industry for bookbinders. There were books that were just bound really simply, sometimes just in like a paper wrap, and others which became really treasured possessions. So they became objects of beauty. And you've probably heard of the Book of Kells in the Middle Ages, where books were illuminated and beautifully decorated there, also because they were precious, they were the Word of God, and they had to look really precious. So the history of the book itself is fascinating. Then we come up further, we had such a thing called the Industrial Revolution, which made for a big change. By this stage, paper was being used. What a huge change. And suddenly the masses wanted to have all these books, and it wasn't just the prerogative of the elite or whatever who could afford to have some books. Suddenly everybody wanted to have books. So the production of books became very much more economical, and books started to spread. Now, that's probably when people realised that all sorts of things could be in those books which could influence people. And artists have always been threading their way through all of this. You've probably heard of Albert Dürer, who did the most beautiful illustrations in books as his etchings. You've probably heard of William Blake. And he also, the illustrator was really the lowest rung, and he realised that he was getting paid very little for his what he thought was very skilled work. So he thought, well, why don't I do the whole lot myself? So he was the first one to work out, he invented how he could actually write his poems into the plate, which could be printed, and he produced the whole book himself. So there's an artist producing an artist book. In the 19th and early 20th century, you had booksellers and you had exhibiting artists, printmakers, illustrators, whatever, painters. And the booksellers thought, okay, a good way to maybe make these important, to make some more sales, was to really produce quality, upmarket, gorgeous, handmade, limited editions. So it was really the beginning of the 20th century. You had these artists, livre to artists, fine bindings of artists' work. Okay, so they were prized, collected pieces, and that would be a collaborative effort between maybe the bookseller organised, or the gallery person might organise it, between the artist who produced the work and a binder who could bind it in a way that it would become a very precious item. So artists were weaving their way into the use of the book. It was also portable, and a few more could go out. You couldn't all buy what was on the wall, but maybe you could buy the book. Now, we all go to galleries and pick up the book of reproductions which are printed. So that's an extension of that, but where they're just very affordable. Okay, so what on earth, all right, this bookbinding can be, a lot of the materials used during the post-industrial era where it was very competitive were, pardon my French, if I'm allowed to say, were crap. So the books fall to pieces. Lovely means that us bookbinders can do a lot of work restoring. There's always bookbinders that bind, there's always bookbinders that restore. That's a different branch of this tree of books. There are also bookbinders that have the skills of traditional bookbinding that want to do something more creative, and that's what we call designer binding. And a designer binder takes a known book, poetry, Shakespeare, whatever, and then in response to it designs something using all the traditional skills and some contemporary ones, and it's like a collaboration with that author, and produces something which is a one-off, beautiful, beautiful collectible book. But they're of known books. So that's sort of designer binding. What on earth are these artist books then? That's a different thing. And we worry about where to put the apostrophe in this artist book. So an artist book is a little different from this. It doesn't contain, it isn't a protective, it isn't a container for a known book. It's not a collaboration with a known author. It is where the artist says, I'm going to do the whole lot. I find this is a really interesting way to present my ideas in 3 dimensions. But it's a book, and the book has something unique with it. I go back to my first statement. You have to read it. You have to put on the white gloves, go up and have a little fossick in it, And while you're doing it, you're having a one-on-one relationship with it. In other words, it's interactive. It also is a book which, if you can explore it, it is sequential. The book has page after page which takes you on a little journey, the same as reading a book. So there's a time element in it, which is different from maybe just a static painting on the wall. So you can determine how to see an image. It can be in that sequential order. And then also you handle it, and back come all the memories maybe of you and books. And most of us have fond memories of favourite books and sitting places and reading books and that tactile thing. And it may even be a tactile experience in the book. So they're unique experiences that are housed in here. And it wasn't long before artists realised, hey, this is a very interesting new vehicle. I can do it all in my studio. I don't have to go anywhere else. I can produce this book myself. Artists have broken all the rules and regulations which perhaps were behind these books. They progress along their road, whereas the artist said, I can use any material as long as it holds together. I can make anything happen here as long as it closes up and becomes a book. And look at these. They just close up and you've got a book. And you have to open it and look at it and decide what you want to do with it. And then you've got a lovely little display. So there's engineering happens, isn't it? Paper engineering. A little bit of interesting structure happens. And you have to handle it and work with it. So it's a little different experience to say, what am I doing with this? And then, all right, I've finished with that book. I can actually slot it and put it away in my library. So there's lots of fun things that can happen. There's a lot of serious things that can happen within the book. But probably if I could just end that an artist's book is designed entirely as a one-off creative statement. It is not a way of giving you more copies of my prints. It's not a way of reproducing my illustrations. I use the little phrase, if I take one page out of that book should collapse. Like music. You know how music takes you on a journey? You should feel that if you take one note away, something is not right. And also you can't add one more note. The music somehow becomes complete. You don't intellectualise it, you experience it. So in a sense, the artist who takes that book form has to work that sequential, tactile, wonderful thing that it only works that way. You can't take a page out and frame it and it's alive, the same as it's in there. And that's probably the definition a little bit. Now, artist books in that sort of category really only began about the 1960s. So it's a baby. It's a baby. Everybody's confused about the definitions. Good, because it's not locked into one yet. Nobody quite knows what to do with it because we can't just put them on the walls in our galleries. So it really is defying the traditional gallery in that you have to provide places where you put gloves and read these things. So they're awkward. They also don't have, by their nature, they don't always contain precious traditional materials. They can maybe be of anything. How far away from the book form can they go? Could they be symbolic of a book in that they might be a 12-foot high concrete thing that says, hello, I'm the Alice in Wonderland? And it's not a book you can handle, but it still rings an echo with you in books. So I use the analogy, it's a little bit like a teenager. How many's got teenagers here or has been through all that? Full of talent, very hard to control. Who knows where it's going to go? Wish you could discipline a little bit more. And which direction it's going to shoot out into at this moment, we don't know, but it's pretty exciting. That's about where the artist books are. Another 100 years, people will be able to say more concrete things about it. But one of the most authoritative people on artist books is Joanna Drucker, and she uses, and I'd like to end with this, the beautiful phrase that she believes that the artist book, in that it's totally designed, complete in itself, is the quintessential 20th century art form. I'll leave you with that. All right, so I've got now you have to get your work because you'll be sick of hearing my voice, but I thought we'll have a little bit of fun and we'll make our first little artist book. So one of those each first, David. Now you've got a just one each to start with. Yes, I want one, absolutely. One of the simplest and easiest forms to get you cracking is called a concertina. And I think I read somewhere where one of the first things that was stated as an artist's book was where somebody was on a train and they did a journey and they did a whole lot of drawings of their journey, which was like 100 drawings, and made this great long concertina of all those drawings, and that was the way it presented the work. I thought that was brilliant. How simple, how revolutionary when we think of books sort of like this. Okay. So you've got a magic thing called a bone folder, and it is bone. Bone doesn't burn paper. It's not sharp, it won't cut. It's just to bookbinders, it's your extension of your hand, a very important tool. You've got a ruler, you've got a very sharp knife. I proved that earlier by slightly stabbing myself. So just treat it with a little care. And we're going to do one method of doing a very simple accordion. Now, accordion and concertina, people get confused which one's which. Accordion books are really where the whole zigzag shape becomes the area of the artwork. So if you think like a Japanese screen, there you are. But it can be made of your watercolours, it can contain things, lots of fun things can happen. So I will demonstrate first and then I'll redo another one. So a very easy way to create this into an even concertina or accordion is just to fold it in half. If you hang on to the two little front bits or they jump all over the place, press your hand down here, flatten that, get this bone folder and use it on its edge, give it a really hard scrape and you'll get a really nice fold, okay? Then we're going to go from there into the middle. This is an easy way, you don't have to measure anything. Have to hang on to those edges or they jump away from you. If you like, I'll just demonstrate and then you can do it and I'll do another one with you. Okay, do the other one. Hold it. Give it a really good rub. Okay, so that's into nice 4 equal parts. Now I'm going to take one end and go up to that first fold. Just tuck it there. Again, hold those 2 points, flatten it with your hand. To a bookbinder, this is one of the most wonderful tools. Turn him round, take the other one up to that first fold, hold the points, press it, otherwise it really wants to pull away from you. Okay, so we're starting to get a few other divisions in here, and I've got 2 long ones at the end, so it's easy to take those up to that first fold. Turn him round. Do the other one up to that first fold. You'll notice that I turn everything around and I work exactly in the same position. You turn the object, not yourself. If you ever cut things, and we will do some cutting, Wendy, who knows me well, I'm very vigorous on correcting technique on how to use knives so that you don't cut yourself. All right, so we've got nice even divisions without measuring any of them. So if we just reverse fold, in other words, we just do that, I've got an accordion that ends up with 2 flaps coming that way. All right, and it just needs a little bit of a press, and there's an accordion book. Okay, now do you want to do it? And I will do another one. So the first one is in half. You just have to hang on if you're left-handed, right-handed, whatever, the other hand holds those 2 points. Squeeze it flat, otherwise it springs away. Just spread your fingers and get that bone folder and it's slightly a sweep outwards. And be quite vigorous with that. And you should end up with a really nice fold. All right? So then you take one of the outside pieces to that centre fold, hold the 2 end points, squeeze. Is everyone? Okay, beautiful. Then the other side. Got our 4 even ones. Now, after you've got the 4, you fold that to the end, one end to the first fold. All right, one end to the first fold line. You've got to really push it down, haven't you? He's really jumping up in the air. And then you just turn him around and take the other end right up to that first division. Then you should end up with your 4 in the middle, and you've got 2 long flaps here. So you just halve them. So you fold it, roll him over to the first one. Actually, another nice tool is about there as well. So those nice soft parts of your hand. But you can't really have them here. So if you've got lovely acrylic fingernails, now you just reverse, or they're all folding one way, and then you just make it fold up. And you've got it. So just there you are. So there's your book. All right. So now we're going to do a little something with a knife, and you've got a cutting mat, and I think there might be another one up here. Oh no, I've got mine here, right in front. So, okay, so I've got a cutting mat here. I'll just use a cutting mat. I don't need the workstation. You can cut into what's there. Now, these 2 ends would actually attach to a cover. I will give you, not just straight away, but I'll give you a couple of pieces of black card. I think I've got enough that you could actually glue one either side, which would do for a cover. All right, so we would often do board, which would cover with cloth and the rest, but sometimes if you just put a double thickness of card, it can end up as the covers, which can be shaped, of course. So we'll leave that there for now, but you know what you can do to quickly finish a cover. It's just the same weight card even. All right, so we'll count those as the covers, and then this is our book here. One of the things that people quite enjoy doing is just cutting. If you paint, or we had paints you could do, I've had where they've done like a lovely landscape that actually happened across here, which you almost could look at like a book, but then you could stretch out and look like a landscape, and then you'd almost tell the story of something going from one side to the other, and that's the difference. And guess what? You've got that side, and you've got light and shade, which alters a little of how you see things. So it's different from a flat painting. It's just easy. If you collage bits and pieces, you can add on bits and pieces, you can make pockets and do all sorts of things. Okay, so, but an easy, fun thing, if you, and again, I'll just demonstrate, and then you can just, you might like to stand with your knife, and you just check that the blade is in. I'm going to do a series of cuts. Come up a little closer if you like. A series of cuts, yes. And my only suggestion is go a little less than halfway. You'll see why in a minute. And why I said you've got to stand, because sometimes this is the clamp that holds everything down, so you can lean on it a bit. You don't have to be super strong in your wrist. And if you need to cut, and I'm going to make sure I go less than half, you may need to do 3 or 4 strokes until you're through. In fact, don't move that ruler until you can sort of do a little bit of that and you know you're through. You get very clever after a while that you can hear the different sound when you've cut through something. I'm going to do several little cuts, just straight. Sounds gritty in the paper. It sort of goes quiet when it goes into the rubber, so you usually know you're through, but you can always do a little bit of that. Okay, I'll just do two the sort of same, which is a bit less. And I'm keeping them fairly straight. And then I'll do another longer one there. And then I'll show you what can happen, and then I'll do another one with you. Are we through? Okay. All right. So if I wanted to see it this way, I would make alternate ones reverse fold. Now all I'm going to do is make sure that that folds where that line is. Just give it a little pinch. Just keep those folds a bit straight to where that cut is. And I'm starting to get a nice sculptural image. So they can become extremely intricate. And all it is just a knife and away you go. Another quite simple one, a little flattened down anyway, is just to do one little box, what I call a little box. And again, you've got to just fold it until you get it there, and then even your bone folder is quite good. And you've suddenly got an interesting little shape. And it's also rather interesting here. So why don't you have a go at doing a little bit of that? All right, just keep your cuts straight. Keep them to, if I'm going to buckle one forward, I did 1, 2, 3, 4. They could all be the same length if you want to. That's just one, but don't cut more than half. If I cut more than half, it starts to poke out, that's all. Okay, so have a little go at that. I can have a sip of water.
Understand how to do that.
It's a link stitch. It's like a buttonhole stitch.
The hole?
Yeah, we have a little, we use an awl and poke a little hole. No, just one of these. Oh. It's usually using all hand tools.
Oh, how is your hand?
All by hand. So I'll just do another one up here. I'm going to do some ones on an angle and see what happens. So you can always flatten your accordion shape down to do all the cutting. And you'll soon see which side you like the look of it. So you then make sure you cut at that angle. But it's just, try some finer ones. So you just need even numbers so that you end up with some poking forward, some poking back. Keeps everyone quiet, doesn't it? We have band-aids if necessary. If you pull the knife towards you, move your accordion around so that you always just pull the knife towards you. You have lots of control and strength. Don't do it on oblique angles. Just turn around, watch you are cutting, run it, press it against that ruler, plenty of weight on the ruler, and pull it, you'll be safe. Sometimes you've got to speak to your thumb that it gets out of the road. It has a habit of easily getting excited and creeping over the edge of a ruler. But if you've ever cut your thumb that way, you usually only do it once, don't you? Look, sometimes even before you fold, just the cuts can look rather nice in themselves. but then you alternate them, pushing in. If you slightly close your book, that will help you do the little folds to just sharpen up those. Once it's closed, you can see where they should fold. I'm going to give you another tool. In fact, I'll get Terence, if you wouldn't mind, give everybody an awl. I'll just do one more little thing, and this is in place of us maybe having paints and things we could work on the surface with collaging. When I teach at COFA, I can have 22 to 26 in the class and absolutely no equipment. So we learn to do wonderful things with cutting stencils, and some of the students do the most amazing work with those simple tools, which they think's pretty good because they don't need studios or anything, else they could almost be doing it on the bus on the way home. Now, some of you do drawing and you know that you maybe spend a long time drawing just with a pencil or just with a piece of charcoal. You don't have to change your tool to do lots of things with that one tool. So the same thinking here is just lots of cuts can be very interesting. And I'll give you this other lovely tool. But they're all having too much fun. Look. Am I allowed to show you something else? This is our sampler. All right, this is just to go home with a few ideas. All right, now this tool can perforate. So you haven't got pencils to draw on here, although you could pick up your biros and play with it. But you can do wonderful things just making holes. Now, normally I work in a little stack of boards, but that can be line work, just perforating. You've got the holes one side, you've got lovely little volcanoes happening the other, so you can alternate them. I had a lass who did a book where she actually wrote words, and she did a whole drawing across a concertina in fine holes that were like with a needle, and she actually wrote words just in the perforation. It was so beautiful. But of course the holes can vary in size. You can do larger ones, you can have her do quite small ones, and you can actually fill in areas and you can have some fun. So just between your two fingers sometimes, although you can do a bit of poking into, in fact your mat board probably is quite good too. I just don't want you to go into the table. So just gently do some little line work with the awl, and it's just another tool for making marks. And I'm just going to demonstrate the last one. I mean, there's so many ideas I could throw at you, but I thought I just might get you a bit excited. And if you produce paintings, you can start off with your watercolours or paintings that didn't really work. You can chop them up and make your books of them. You can attach bits of them. I had a lady who did a Kofa girl, and I don't have an image of her work, but it just was so wonderful. She was a painter, so she actually bound her canvas paintings. And she if you opened it in the middle, she had a landscape one side, and she had perforated holes absolutely regularly on the other side. And where those holes, when you close the page, went on to her painting, she did some little hand embroidery, just little textured changes. So there are all these little dots of a sympathetic colour across her paintings, and you couldn't wait to see the next one. She changed the sequence of the holes, slightly changed the type of hole, and there they were reflected in the painting, and you just were fascinated. She's, as all art, she showed me something I'd never seen before, and it was exciting. Now you can put little extensions inside this book form, and I'll give you some of this to take home anyway so you can play. Now I've got just I'm going to stitch a section in, and I'm going to use a piece of paper. If I fold that paper in half, and sometimes it's just, you can see you can do a lot of things without too much measuring, and if I just make a little lip either end, and I'm doing it very casually. Okay, I've got a little shape. Okay, I'm going to attach that shape into my book here, like a little pop-up. All right? Now I can also cut into it if I want to, or maybe I just want to have writing on it or something. But all I need to do is attach it, and probably for your trial ones, you only need a glue stick. For your more serious ones, you need it maybe to attach a little bit more, so you can just experiment with the best glue. So if I just wipe a little bit on that edge, and almost if I close it there, I can think, okay, I want it to go from about here to here. So there's my first one. Just stick him on. I can decide how high up, how low down. Put a little bit of glue stick on the other, and if I close it, I literally can close the concertina on it. So you can have additions to your page, which could have cuts in them as well. So I'll make sure you got one of those pieces of paper and take home, and you can add that in. And all it is, work out where you want it to go, but if you close your fold on it, then it will come absolutely in the middle. That's the only little trick, that if you close it down and you've got glue on it, close that onto it, it will be on the mirror side, and you've got it absolutely in the middle. So none of it's hard, is it? But it's fascinating. It's a little bit, we call it paper engineering. Now I would like to put a little text book in here. So this is slightly bigger than I want, but I'm going to put a book in there, which could be as many pages as I want. All right? So it just has to fit in that fold there. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put a hole in the middle, a hole near the top, a hole near the bottom, right through that fold, and stitch it in what is known as a pamphlet stitch, which has been around forever. They used to sew books this way before they had staples. So if some of you, I get the Wentworth Courier, and the Wentworth Courier is stapled, and it's all one big section, and you can be watching what I'm doing here. So I'm just leaving the beginning out on the outside there because I like the look of it. And the pamphlet stitch is just those 3 holes. I'm going back to the middle, to the outside. Got to straddle my thread and just simply tie a knot. And then my book's in there. Okay, so I could include books in it, and I deliberately put the thread out here because I thought it was rather cute, and I might put beads on it, and who knows what I might do. I might just even give it a little bit of a curl and make it a decorative feature, because that side of this book is important. So you've got lots of things you can actually play with, and I think it really has a front and a back. It's not a book that just has one perspective. In fact, it looks rather nice, slightly looking down, and that's where it becomes really sculptural, in that all different angles, and you get fussy with how the light hits it, and it's really nice this way, and so you can create all sorts of illusions. But to finish your sample, because I'd like to just say a few more things, one thing you can always do is shape the top. So I'm just cutting the shape out. We could have as much interesting silhouette across the top as we wanted. And I certainly have had a number of people, and there's lovely examples where they do like a city skyline, and then they have all images of the city down here, and you get this wonderful image. And I had one of the COFA students, she actually cut the whole, this may be a little bit hard to cut, it's been long, but we'll see if we can cut it. She just went from the cover and diminished it all the way down to the other end of the book. And she did a cityscape that was therefore more or less in perspective. And it was absolutely, the whole thing in white, it was absolutely beautiful. And she had a beautifully designed cover either end that closed it up like a book. So generally speaking, with accordions, and I might like to leave that cup, no, we'll take him right through. You need the bottom of it, or the base of it, to sit on your table for support. So it needs that table there, but you've got a rather interesting, you could do things with, and you could add bits and pieces that sit up, and you could have all sorts of wonderful little things happening here. All right, so the tops can be shaped, and you can have a lot of fun in just doing that. All right, does that give you some ideas? That is just one little aspect, and that's not using any change of colour or anything. But what you need to do is don't throw out any bits and pieces of paper, because they suddenly become... Don't throw out any of your paintings and drawings, because they can really be used. And all you need to explore is that how can I make whatever I'm doing work over a series of surfaces, and then you are actually making a book. After that, you should be able to close it up, and there's your book form. All right? Now, would you like to ask me any questions at this stage?
Yes,
What do I...
What type of string or button do you use?
Okay, I've got traditional handbook binding materials, and they have a history in the sense that we use a linen thread because it is non-stretching, whereas your nylon threads are. It's extremely strong, it's natural, and it's therefore long-lasting also, and it doesn't burn paper, which we sew. When we re-sew books, you're using it to do all this intricate sewing in the spine as well. Yes, so there's things in, and we talk about grain of paper. Has anybody heard that before? Paper has a grain. In the sense that I said to David, cut these for us, and we cut the first ones long, and the long ones, which were the length of the sheet, were against the grain. So when I did the first sample, it's folding against itself. So when I folded it, even with the bone folder, it was starting to look a bit bruised because it's going against the fibres. So we then cut yours with the grain, and it folds beautifully. All right, so we learn lots of things about grain of paper. And yes, the traditional tools are mostly, you can see knives and bone folders and needles and threads and some wooden clamps, and the rest are sort of the tools we use. It's simple, it's not hard, and it can be quite addictive. Beats the housework. I've got a book here which you might like to pass around, or in a minute just come up and have a look at all this work. There's white gloves here and you can handle all the work here very gently. Another aspect of artist books, which there's some wonderful examples here, is some people are exploring the altered book, which is taking a book and making it something beautiful and new or interesting. Now that's a fairly basic example, but if you've got a book that you don't ever need as the book, you can play with your knife, cut bits out, curl the paper, make tunnels through it, add some colour to it. You can even look at a page and say, if I blot out all the, get my brush and fill in and just leave words here and there that are on different areas of the page, I might create an interesting sentence or poem. And you block out all the rest. You can cut up words that are in here and use them as a way of creating other words with them. So just take the lid off. There's no real rules. That doesn't close as a book. It's become a piece of sculpture. But that's just from a book. These are paper engineering. That's based on what you've just done, isn't it? That's an accordion. It's called a tunnel book. And it's like a little stage set. And the images float in the middle and you look at it. It just all folds up and there it is. I do have a couple of things for you. You've got to do one more thing and then you know me. Take one of these, and there's a little bit about us and what we've talked about today. So make sure Terence, I'll get you to hand these around and I'll just fold up one. You need your bone folder and ruler. So I think there's one there for everyone. Oops. So I'll just move this aside, but you can have a feel of that. It really farts you. Okay. So have we got one of these little... I use these when I do promotions anyway because it's a bit of fun. Now, have a look at the Sydney bookbinding motif up the top. Roll him over so that he forms the top. Hold the edges together. Get your bone folder and make him into a triangle. Okay. Open him up. And now you're just going to fold it in half. No more triangles. Just in half one way. Just hold those edges together. Fold it the other way. Again, your fingers. So you do one triangular fold, and then you open it up and you do half, pattern on the outside and the writing on the inside, half the other way. Then if you just open it and keep that Sydney bookbinding up, you can tuck the two sides in and you end up with a nice little square. And if I give you an envelope, you've just received a nice little card from me. And I've got one more to give you. Then you've got me, you see. Now, I've got these prepared, but I thought you might like to see it. Somebody in this audience knows all of these lovely little games. This is from an A4 piece of paper, which if you can play with your computer, you can do the printing on it. Okay? It is a long, folded up concertina. All right? So I'll show you how it's done. Not that you'll remember, but you'll have one. All right, so one fold, and you'll notice that, again, I don't have to measure anything. It's wonderful, isn't it? You don't have to... See, my eyesight, I can't count all those little things on rulers. But you don't have to. So I'm folding it over again to the middle. I can see that line at least. going to fold this one over. Okay, that's one way. Now I'm going to fold it this way. And again into itself. So they all go the one way, the others went the other way. Okay, get it the right way up. That's the first page, and then I'm going to do some cutting. I always taught these under the title of cards that become books and books that become cards, because I think they're more fun than sometimes getting a static, just folded card. And sometimes my Christmas cards or little so-called hellos, or like exactly like this, where somebody wants to, if I'm promoting what we're about a little bit, I do these. All right, it involves a bit of handwork, but that's what I'm about anyway. It makes boring TV much more interesting. Pinch it in the centre, close it up, fold 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 it up, and you've got a little book, and we've made little cases for them, and that's just a matter of gluing it into there. You're going to want me to do that, aren't you? A little bit of glue stick. There goes the first, what we call an end paper. Just gets attached with a nice sort of even border there. Give it a bit of a rub. Put the last page in. Stick him in. One thing about the glue stick, it doesn't set instantly, so I can do a bit of sliding around until it's in the right spot. And there I've got a little book. All right, so you're all getting one of those. So usually I throw them and you have to catch. You any good at catching? But I thank Terence for being an assistant, and you all get one of those, and that's also, now you've got what our shop is about. And you just read it like a little book. You see it sort of pulls out, but once it's actually glued in, it's a bit hard to work out how it happens, so that's the secret, you see. But it's all grown from the same thing, it's just cutting and folding papers. It's not cut right through. It's all upside down and back to front because you need to have something like PageMaker or whatever to be able to do that. But you can hand do it. Make the little book up, and then you can write what you want on the pages. Yeah, if you just if you want to say hello to somebody, wouldn't it be cute to put that in a little envelope and just say, I'm just sitting here, I've made you a little book, I hope you like it, I've left a couple of blank pages for you to fill in. Or, I need to buy some tomatoes, no, carrots, whatever, there's my week's shopping list, whatever. It's just fun. It's just fun. All right. Now, just to conclude, I do have a important task here because there's a certain person on the premises who has actually managed to do a bookbinding course and with me, and I'm here to present him with his certificate. David, would you like to come forward and receive your certificate of achievement? And there's a little critique there, which you can deal with afterwards.
I was wondering about that.
I couldn't resist. All right, so we're pretty well on time, I think. Please fire some questions. If you want to come and have a look, come and just get a pair of white gloves, please, and have a good look at these books. Gently, of course, but look, white gloves are here. I'm going to slip my rosé, and I hope you've enjoyed that.